Doe, formerly known as Eve, isn't the first brand that comes to mind when you're talking about the best gaming monitors. Infamously overambitious, the community-driven brand has found itself in hot water over the past few years with unfulfilled customer orders and a lack of communication with its community. The Spectrum Black 32, Doe's second OLED display, is a monument to the next era of this company. The days of strife seem to have passed for Doe, with its monitors now available on Amazon and seemingly in the hands of customers. The Spectrum Black 32 faces other problems, however. Despite showcasing promising features, a ton of customization options, and an envy-inducing 3rd-gen WOLED panel, the Spectrum Black 32 still needs a lot of work before it can up with the best OLED monitors on the market. You could stack up the Doe Spectrum Black up against the Eve, Doe's previous name, Spectrum, from a few years ago, and barely notice a difference in design. It's a black rectangle, but that's not a bad thing. Even with no branding and a minimal design, the Doe Spectrum Black feels premium, even more so than something like the MSI MPG 321 URX. A big reason for that is the dark gray finish that wraps around the backside of the monitor, which is constructed fully of metal. Like similar LEDs, such as the Sony InZone M10S, the panel itself is very thin. Doe stuffs all of your connections and the guts of the monitor in a raised section at the back of the display. It's completely out of view, which makes the monitor feel much thinner than it actually is when viewed from the front. It's a great looking display, but the big thing that stands out from a design perspective is the stand. Doe doesn't include a stand by default. You'll need to spend an extra $99 to get the stand. It's a nice stand, constructed fully of metal and with a cable routing channel through the center to keep your cable clutter at bay. But it's an extra that you'll have to pay for, while nearly every other monitor you can buy includes a stand in the box. The lack of a stand by default could be good or bad depending on your situation. For starters, Doe only uses one stand. If you have a previous version of the Spectrum, you can swap over the stand. In addition, the stand mount uses a standard 100 by 100mm VESA mount, so you can throw the monitor up on an arm if you want. If you already have a monitor arm, you're saving money, and that's great. On the other hand, if you just want a monitor with all of the normal conveniences like a stand, you'll end up spending more than the competition. As someone who's had several monitor arms acquired over the years, we ultimately like the decision to separate the stand out. However, it's something you'll need to keep in mind when shopping around if you have nothing to prop the Black Spectrum up on. If you're wondering if the Doe Spectrum Black has a particular feature you might want, there's a good chance the answer is yes. It's packed to the brim with extras. The standout feature is the dual refresh rate, allowing you to switch between 4K at 240Hz and 1080p at 480Hz. Like the LG Ultra Gear Dual Mode OLED, there's a dedicated button to the front lip of the monitor that changes between the two modes. You can rebind the command of this button as well. It's the standout, and there's a lot more here. For starters, if you get black frame insertion or BFI. We've seen this feature before on monitors like the Asus ROG Swift 32QD OLED, which halves the refresh rate and inserts a black frame in between each refresh. You don't actually see those black frames. Instead, you get more stable frames during each refresh. If you're, for example, playing games locked at 60 frames per second on a console, you'll see motion blur between two frames. BFI provides better motion clarity by blacking out the screen between each frame, so you don't get any strange transitions where multiple frames show up on the screen at once. It's a great feature for consoles, although you'll have to significantly sacrifice the brightness of the display in order to use it. In addition to BFI, Doe includes clamping for popular color spaces like DCI P3 and Adobe RGB, as well as an anti-flicker setting for the variable refresh rate in the display. The latter will raise the lower bound of the VRR range, preventing flicker on content running at a low frame rate. Finally, Doe supports two inputs at once, either through split screen or picture-in-picture mode. A favorite feature is screen emulation though. The Spectrum Black includes pixel perfect scaling, and it allows you to emulate 27, 25, or 21-inch monitor. And that's extremely useful for competitive gamers who are used to playing on a smaller 1080p display, especially considering the 480Hz refresh rate option. It's rare to find a monitor with customization options, but that's exactly what Doe offers with the Spectrum Black. You can pick up the monitor with or without a USB hub and with different DisplayPort standards. Getting the bare bones model will save you a lot of money compared to the competition, and all with the same image quality. Without the USB hub, you're getting a standard lineup of ports, two HDMI 2.1 connections, and a DisplayPort 1.4 port. You'll have to use the lossless display stream compression to achieve 4K at 240Hz. That's true of even much more expensive monitors packing this panel. panel, such as the Asus ROG Swift PG32 UCDP. If you want to turn off DSC at the cost of your refresh rate, you can. This model, which is the most inexpensive for $900 for a matte coating and $1,100 for a glossy coating, doesn't have a USB port. It includes one USB-C connection, but that's only for firmware updates. If you want USB ports, you'll need to spend $1,300 for the highest end configuration. Dough makes the highest end model worth the money. You're getting the glossy Gorilla Glass coating along with DisplayPort 2.1, so you can have the full resolution and refresh rate without DSC. Newer OLED options like the HP Omen Transcend 32 are transitioning to DisplayPort 2.1 as well. More importantly, you get a total of 4 USB ports, 2 USB-C and 2 USB-A, along with a USB-C input that's capable of 100 watt of power delivery. We love the fact that you can ditch the hub and save some money. For a ton of users, a USB hub is extraneous in a monitor, and no other brand offers this level of flexibility. If you want to go with the USB hub, you even get a KVM switch. The menu side of things isn't as rosy. The on-screen display has everything you need, but it's difficult to navigate. Dough makes some attempts at clarity with short explainers for each of the options, but we suspect a lot of users will still get lost in the OSD. There are a ton of options, and with only a 4-way joystick to get around, finding all of them can be a pain. Great design, a ton of features, and a price that, minus the stand, is very competitive with more mainstream options. So what's the catch with the Dough Spectrum Black? Image quality, it turns out. We've tested the exact same panel plenty of times before, and the results here don't line up with what we'd expect. This is still an OLED monitor, and it still looks great, but Dough has a lot of work to do. Gamut performance sets the stage for why. In SDR, the gamut is spot on. We've seen some QD OLED panels like the Alienware 32QD OLED crack above 90% of Adobe RGB, but for the most recent WOLED options, the gamut here is right. By default, the monitor sticks to DCI P3, but it has options to clamp the gamut to different color spaces as well. And then HDR comes into the picture. These results are all off, but that's because the tone mapping for SDR content is all off. You get the horrific grayed out look that was familiar with HDR monitors a few years ago. HDR content looks good, but trying to run any SDR content on the display will throw the colors and contrast way off. Dough has addressed SDR tone mapping a bit with a new firmware update. Colors are a pain point in general. As you can see from these color accuracy results, this panel should be hitting a color error of just over 1, but Dough's display is hitting a color error over 2 when measured against sRGB. You don't need any fancy calibration tools to see that the color is off either. Regardless of the preset, it seemed like something was off. The display P3 settings pushes too heavily into the greens, while the sRGB mode is too blue. We wanna like the Dough Spectrum Black, we love the design and appreciate Dough's approach to customization options. The wealth of features even manages to help the Spectrum Black stand out from the dozens of other OLED monitors that have flooded the market. Still, it feels like a monitor that's in beta testing.